I was watching this guy get ready for a job interview the other day. He had the perfect suit, the firm handshake practiced in the mirror, and the smile that looked like it had been stapled to his face.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was rehearsing his answers, turning his real weaknesses into strengths, like a political spin doctor.
Right, the classic move.
Muttering to himself, I'm just too passionate about hitting deadlines. Then he walks into the room, the sterile box, smells of cheap coffee and quiet desperation. And the HR manager, first question, so where do you see yourself in 5 years? And you could just see it flash in his eyes like, hopefully not here, answering this exact question to someone like you.
But that's not what he said, I'm guessing.
Not a chance.
Yeah.
What came out was this perfectly crafted speech about growth, synergy, becoming a key asset,
right.
All that. It was flawless, a beautiful lie.
A performance.
Exactly. And it just made me wonder about this whole bizarre theater we all do, this strange ritual where one person pretends they're the perfect employee and the other pretends the job is, the opportunity of a lifetime. It's not really conversation, is it? It's a game.
A game, yeah.
A ridiculous, sometimes humiliating circus with all these unwritten rules. So I guess, what are those rules? And how do you play to win without completely selling your soul?
That really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? That tension you described. That's our deep dive today. We're exploring this professional HR debate. The big question, does the traditional job interview actually measure if you can do the job your competence? Or has it just become this performance?
Testing how well you follow the script.
Exactly. Or worse, maybe testing conformity, even docility. So we're going to dig into the psychological side, the legal rules you have to know, and crucially, the shift towards newer, more objective ways of hiring. And we're really grounding this in highly structured labor markets, specifically looking at France. Because the stakes there, if you make a bad long-term hire, they're huge.
Right.
And that pressure forces a certain kind of rigor, you know, which gives us really important lessons for anyone involved in finding talent anywhere.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, when you think about all the effort, the anxiety, the practicing, you have to ask if the standard way is actually working for anyone. So let's start there with the status quo, this old game. What's the typical structure most big companies are still using?
Well, when HR folks map out a formal process, they usually break it down, typically into about 5 main parts. Yeah. The idea, at least in theory, is to get a whole picture of the candidate.
Okay, 5 parts. What are they?
So first, the introduction. Welcome, set the scene. Then you get into the candidate background. They give you the rundown of their career so far.
Right, the CV you walk through.
Pretty much. Then come the job-specific questions. This is about technical stuff, experience.
Yeah.
After that, you hit this really critical layer, the behavioral questions, asking for real examples of things they've done.
Okay.
And finally, the conclusion. Candidate asks their questions, you talk next steps, that sort of thing.
And the official reason for all this is it sounds good on paper, right? Get a well-rounded view, check technical skills, people skills, problem solving, and that fuzzy thing, cultural fit.
That's the rationale, yeah.
But inside that structure, that's where we find those questions, the ones everyone kind of rolls their eyes at because they demand a performance, not really honesty.
Precisely. These are the infamous beautiful lies questions. Like, take the simplest one. Parlez-moi de vous. Tell me about yourself.
The icebreaker.
They call it an icebreaker, but what the recruiter's really looking for is structure, relevance, how you control the narrative. Can you boil down your life story into a neat professional package that fits the job? They don't actually want to hear about your stamp collection.
Ah, right. And what about those ones that feel like they need a crystal ball? Like, où vous voyez-vous dans 5 ans? Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah, nobody expects you to predict the future, obviously. That question is mainly looking at your long-term goals. Do they line up, even vaguely, with where the company is heading?
So it's about alignment, not prophecy.
Exactly. If the companies say really flat and centralized, and you start talking about climbing the ladder fast into some leadership role that doesn't even exist there, well, you've just flagged yourself as likely to leave. They're checking commitment, strategic fit.
Okay. And then the absolute classic, the weakness question. Everyone knows the trick is to disguise a strength, right?
Yeah.
Quelles sont vos principales forces et faiblesses? Strengths and weaknesses.
The strength part is usually easy. It's the weakness that's the real test. They're looking for self-awareness, yeah, but also honesty balanced with proactivity.
So not, I'm just awful at meeting deadlines.
Definitely not that. More like, in the past, I sometimes found it hard to delegate because I really value quality. But I've put systems in place, maybe used a specific tool to manage my time better. And I actively look for chances to mentor junior staff now. See, you show awareness, action, and development.
Okay, so identify a manageable flaw and show you're fixing it.
Right. They need to see where you might need support, but it can't be something fatal to the role.
Yeah, and the last big one, the motivation check. Pourquoi voulez-vous travailler pour notre entreprise? Why us?
This is really a baseline check. Did you do your homework? It measures your motivation, your genuine interest, how much research you actually did.
Did you look at their website for more than 5 minutes?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you tailored your answer at all? Do you know anything specific about them? A recent launch, their mission? It shows enthusiasm and, well, basic diligence.
Okay, so let's put this whole high-stakes performance into context now. Why is the French labor market, with its very specific rules, such a crucial place to study this whole interview game? Why does it matter so much there?
It matters because the cost of getting a hire wrong in France is, well, it's exponentially higher than in a lot of other places. The French labor market is famously protective of employees.
Right, strong worker protections.
Very strong. The unemployment rate was around 7.5% in 2024, which isn't insignificant. But the really key thing is the CDI. The contrat de durée indéterminée.
That's the permanent open-ended contract, right? The gold standard.
That's exactly it. And it's incredibly common. In 2023, over 85% of the workforce had a CDI. When a company gives you one, they're making a huge long-term legal commitment.
It's hard to end a CDI, isn't it?
It's not impossible, but the process for ending one, whether for economic reasons or disciplinary issues, is very formal. It can take a long time, and it can get very expensive for the company if the employee challenges it.
So the pressure on that initial hiring decision must be immense.
Absolutely immense. Recruiters are under enormous pressure to get it right, to ensure fairness, accuracy, and maybe most importantly, that long-term fit. Because a mistake can have serious legal and financial fallout years later. That pressure is why they lean on these structured processes, but it's also why things can sometimes go off the rails.
That pressure definitely connects to the darker side of interviews. The power dynamic, you mentioned the candidate rehearsing, putting on a costume. That points to something psychologists talk about, right?
Yes, definitely. Experts often call the interview setup a social domination scene. Think about it. The candidate is automatically in a vulnerable spot, needing to prove their worth to the people holding the keys.
They're asking for something.
Right. And that environment naturally makes people focus on performance, on conforming. The candidate isn't really thinking, how do I best show my real skills? They're thinking, how do I manage what this recruiter thinks of me? Which pushes them towards those safe, maybe inauthentic, rehearsed answers.
That makes total sense. Survival mode kicks in, not truth mode. They just want to pass the conformity test. And even the room setup matters.
Oh, absolutely. The physical layout is huge. A lot of experts now actually advise against sitting directly face-to-face.
Really? Why?
Because it feels confrontational. They suggest arranging chairs at more of a 3/4 angle. It sounds like a small thing, but it's meant to lessen that feeling of opposition, that social pressure. It acknowledges the psychology of the space itself.
Interesting. But sometimes that psychological pressure isn't subtle at all. It crosses a line into being invasive, abusive, just plain illegal. Which brings us to this case study you mentioned that sounds, frankly, unbelievable. The illegal handbag test. What on earth is that?
The test du sac à main.
Yeah,
it's pretty shocking. It involves an interviewer asking a female candidate to open her personal handbag right there in front of them.
For what possible reason?
The given reason is usually something flimsy, like checking her organizational skills or tidiness. But the real twisted logic behind it is apparently to test how docile she is, how willing she is to submit to authority.
Wow, that feels like a massive invasion of privacy. Setting aside how unethical it is, what makes it specifically illegal?
Well, first off, it's clearly sex-based discrimination. It targets women, tied to an item typically associated with them. But the deeper illegality is forcing someone to potentially reveal incredibly private, protected information.
Like what?
Think about what might be in a handbag. Medical information, prescriptions, personal documents, things related to family, finances. The employer has zero right to any of that during hiring. The law is crystal clear about protecting a candidate's private life from intrusion.
Okay, so if, God forbid, a listener ever encounters this or something similarly invasive, what should they do? What's the professional way to handle it?
The advice is clear. Refuse calmly but firmly. State clearly that the request is about your private life and has nothing to do with your ability to do the job.
And if they push back?
If the interviewer insists, or if things get hostile, the candidate should absolutely feel empowered to politely end the interview right there. The law is 100% on their side. And frankly, an incident like that should be reported to the labor authorities.
That handbag example really highlights how strict the legal boundaries are, especially in places like France that prioritize fairness. We need to unpack those rules a bit more. What exactly are employers forbidden from doing or asking? Why are those vague, subjective questions so risky legally?
French labor law is incredibly strict on this. It explicitly forbids discrimination based on 18 specific criteria, and the list is broad.
18? Like what?
Oh, it covers age, sex, origin, meaning ethnicity or nationality, sexual orientation, health status, family situation, political opinions, union activities, physical appearance, even your last name, your patronymic surname.
Wait, hang on. You're saying discriminating based on someone's last name is illegal?
Yes. The perception tied to a name. It's that comprehensive. The core legal principle, it's in Article LA 1132-1 of the Labor Code, is simple. The only information an interviewer can legally ask for must directly relate to the candidate's ability to actually perform the job tasks or their professional skills, period.
So any question that isn't directly job relevant is basically off limits?
Legally, yes. And that's why vague questions are so dangerous. They open the door wide for an interviewer's unconscious bias to slip in and influence the decision based on one of those 18 protected things rather than on competence.
And if a company does get caught breaking these rules, what are the consequences?
They're severe, which shows how seriously this is taken. An individual manager found guilty could face up to 3 years in prison and a fine of 45,000 euro.
Prison time.
Yes. And for the company itself, the fines can be much higher, up to 225,000, potentially even 375,000 in certain cases, like if it involves access to public services. The legal risk of using biased, non-objective hiring methods is just enormous. It makes getting the assessment right not just an ethical issue, but a critical financial one.
That's the legal framework. But even if nobody's being intentionally malicious or breaking the law, there's still the basic human problem, right? Our brains are just wired with shortcuts and biases that mess up objectivity.
That's the constant battle. We rely on generalizations. The stereotype in this context is that dangerous leap where a recruiter takes one single bad experience and applies it broadly, like thinking the last person I hired from that university was flaky, so nobody from that university is right for this role, which is clearly illogical.
And then you have those classic psychological effects like the halo effect messing things up too.
Oh, the halo effect is everywhere. That's when a recruiter lets one single thing. Maybe the candidate gave a really slick presentation, or maybe they just like their handshake completely color their entire judgment of the person.
So one good or bad trait creates a halo that blinds them to everything else.
Exactly. It prevents them from seeing the person's actual mix of strengths and weaknesses objectively.
And the opposite, almost, is the similarity bias, hiring people just like yourself.
Right. We're naturally drawn to people who seem like us, shared background, similar attitudes, went to the same school. The similarity bias means recruiters subconsciously rate candidates who mirror them more highly.
Which sounds like a recipe for building teams that all think the same way.
It absolutely is. If the hiring manager went to a certain elite university, they're statistically much more likely to favor candidates from that same school, even if their skills aren't demonstrably better. It creates real systemic barriers for diverse talent.
And you can see the stark reality of this when you look at the research on how bias affects candidate filtering. The numbers are pretty shocking, aren't they?
They really are grim. This research set up a reference candidate, sort of the default profile. White, 30s, good neighborhood, conventionally good-looking. Let's say they got 100 positive responses in the test.
Okay, the baseline.
Now compare that. Candidates who had a surname identified as Maghrebian. They only got 36 positive responses. Older candidates, say 48 to 50, only 32.
That's nearly 3 times less likely to get a positive response just because of your name or age. That's systemic bias in action.
Undeniably. It shows that those subjective factors, the things outside the actual job skills, are actively weeding out qualified people before they even get a fair shot.
And often those subjective criteria are just stand-ins for illegal judgments, right? Like where someone lives.
Exactly. Why should a recruiter care where you live unless the job physically requires you to be nearby? They shouldn't. But proximity often acts as a proxy for judging someone based on neighborhood stereotypes.
Or making assumptions about their personal life.
Yes, like maybe favoring a single candidate with no family over someone with kids, assuming the single person will be less risky or more available. That's blatant discrimination based on family status, framed as risk assessment.
It all points back to the same conclusion. You can't trust gut feelings. You need objective data. You mentioned a great example with the French police force realizing their own hiring criteria were biased and actually hurting their effectiveness.
Yeah, it's a perfect case study. Historically, police recruitment put a huge emphasis on physical strength, which almost by definition screens out many women.
Right.
But then they did a proper analysis of what police officers actually do day to day. And what emerged as the core activity wasn't chasing people or physical takedowns, but conflict resolution.
So talking people down, not wrestling them down?
Precisely. De-escalation, negotiation, social awareness. Those skills turned out to be far more critical than brute strength in most situations. So by shifting the focus away from pure physical might towards measurable skills like communication and problem solving, they did two things. They reduced gender discrimination, and they actually improved how well their officers performed the real job.
That's a fantastic example of how focusing on the real competencies fixes both ethical problems and performance issues, which leads us straight into the solution, the competency-based framework. If we want to escape the beautiful lies circus, we need structure, and things like the ILLICIDE methodology provide that.
Exactly. ILLICIDE and methods like it represent that necessary shift in thinking and practice. The core idea is pretty simple. Ditch the prejudice, ditch the gut feelings, and focus entirely on skills you can actually measure.
Why is this shift so critical?
Two main reasons. One, it helps you hire the best person for the job, which makes your company more competitive. Two, it ensures you're complying with those strict anti-discrimination laws we talked about.
Okay, so how does a framework like this define competence? It can't just be a vague, they know their stuff, right? It needs to be specific, measurable.
Right. It breaks competence down into three distinct, non-negotiable parts to make sure you're evaluating thoroughly. First is savoir, which means knowledge.
Okay, knowledge, like knowing facts, theories.
Yeah, the theoretical or operational foundation. Do they know the software? Understand the safety rules? It's the information they possess.
Got it. But then there's the second part, savoir-faire, or know-how. Why is that separate? Isn't knowing something the same as knowing how to do it?
Ah, that's a crucial distinction for objectivity. Know-how is about the practical application. It's the doing.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Knowing accounting principles, that's savoir knowledge. But actually using those principles to successfully manage a complex international marketing budget, that's savoir-faire, know-how. It's about mastering the task, applying the knowledge. Using word, not just knowing what word is.
Okay, that makes sense. Knowledge is theory, know-how is practice. What's the third piece? You said it sort of captures cultural fit, but objectively.
The third is comportement professionnel, which translates to professional behavior. This defines the specific conduct expected in relation to the job's activities.
So not just general personality traits.
No, critically, it has to be tied to the job. Things like punctuality might count, or tenacity when facing problems, or how they manage relationships with their boss or team. But these behaviors must be defined by the job requirements, not just the interviewer's personal preference for, say, someone outgoing. If the job needs collaboration, you measure tenacity by how they navigated a team setback, not by their clothing style.
So the real magic isn't just defining these three parts, it's how the interview process uses them to force objectivity. You mentioned two steps, identification and validation. What's identification?
Identification is basically the first half of the interview. This is where the recruiter finds out what the candidate knows, theoretically, savoir, and what they claim they can do practically, savoir-faire. It relies on their CV, their diplomas, the stories they tell about their experience. It's the candidate making their case.
Okay, laying out their stall. But the crucial part where the system really fights bias is validation. That's where you check if the claims are true.
Validation is everything. This is where objectivity lives or dies. It means getting concrete, factual proof for every significant claim the candidate makes about their know-how or professional behavior. The interviewer has to switch gears from just listening to actively fact-checking.
How does that change the questions you ask?
Dramatically. You have to move away from those closed, leading questions that just invite a simple yes or no, often a dishonest yes.
Like, are you a team player? Everyone says yes.
Exactly. Instead, you use situational, behavioral, fact-finding questions. Questions that demand specifics.
Okay, give me a practical example. How do you validate, say, if someone really knows advanced Excel without making them build a spreadsheet on the spot?
Good question. Instead of asking, are you good at Excel, which is useless, you ask something like, describe a specific time you used advanced Excel functions to manage a complex budget in your last role. What particular formulas or features did you use? Why were they necessary? And what was the measurable outcome?
So you force them to describe a real action and its result. They have to provide details.
Exactly. It pushes them from making vague claims to recounting verifiable actions. You demand the proof behind the assertion.
You may even ask for physical proof.
You could. If they claim a specific certification that's crucial, asking for a copy isn't unreasonable. If they claim tenacity, you ask, tell me about a project that hit a major roadblock. Walk me through the exact steps you took to get it back on track. Validation turns the interview from a charm offensive into a competence audit.
Okay, let's nail this down for listeners. If we're adopting this competency-based approach, what are the classic fuzzy questions we absolutely need to ditch?
You have to throw out any question that only produces subjective, unprovable fluff. So definitely retire. What are your main strengths and weaknesses? We know the weakness answer is usually fake.
Right.
Retire. Do you handle stress well? Supportez-vous bien le stress? The answer is always yes, and it tells you zero about their actual coping mechanisms under pressure. These questions are vague, they're legally risky, and they give you no real data.
So what replaces them? What are the powerful evidence-based questions we should be asking?
The best questions are behavioral or situational. They often follow the STAR method logic: situation, task, action, result, even if you don't spell it out. They focus on concrete past actions and measurable outcomes.
So instead of, are you a good team player?
Ask. Tell me about a specific time you had a significant disagreement with a colleague about project priorities. What was the situation? What exactly did you do or say? And what was the final resolution?
That forces them into a story that reveals their actual professional behavior in a tricky situation.
Precisely. Or instead of, are you proactive? Ask. Describe a project you initiated or significantly reshaped. What was the need you identified? What steps did you take to get it off the ground? And what was the impact? These questions make skills visible through past actions.
And this need for clear, objective proof becomes even more important with things like remote work and AI changing the game, right?
Oh, absolutely. It makes the competency framework not just useful, but essential. You mentioned remote work, maybe 30% of the French workforce doing it in 2023. You can't rely on a handshake or reading body language over Zoom in the same way.
And AI recruitment tools.
Same issue. Big companies like Orange are using AI software. But an algorithm can only assess what you tell it to assess. If your criteria are vague or biased, good communication skills, the AI will just learn and replicate the biases in your existing data. You need meticulously defined, measurable competencies for the AI to work fairly and effectively. The framework forces that clarity.
That push towards objective measurement brings us to the really innovative stuff happening now, the new game in recruitment. If CVs are starting to look the same, how do companies find raw potential and adaptability, not just past experience?
Yeah, recruiters are being forced to get creative. Because, as experts like Jerome Lecow point out, the traditional CV is becoming less useful as a differentiator. Lots of candidates have good grades, decent internships, claim similar skills.
Everyone's optimized their LinkedIn profile.
Exactly. So if you're hiring for future needs, you can't just look backward. You have to assess potential, their capacity to learn and grow, and adaptability, how they handle change and uncertainty. And that means getting them out of the interview room and into more dynamic situations.
Moving from the standardized test to something more like a real-world challenge, which leads us to things like L'Oreal Brandstorm. Tell us about that.
Brandstorm is a really well-established example. It's basically a huge global competition where L'Oreal gives student teams a complex real-world business challenge related to one of its brands, maybe sustainability or digital marketing or entering a new market.
So it's like a massive extended case study.
Way more than that. These teams work for months. They have to develop prototypes, do market research, interact with L'Oreal experts, network. It's an immersive experience.
And what does L'Oreal get out of it, assessment-wise, that they wouldn't get from interviews?
They get to see skills in action over a long period, under pressure. Applied creativity, strategic thinking, teamwork, resilience when things go wrong. Things that are almost impossible to judge accurately in a one-hour chat. They see the candidate's process, not just a polished presentation.
And the result is a talent pool.
A highly vetted talent pool. Many Brandstorm alumni get hired because the company has seen direct evidence of their potential and adaptability over months.
Okay, so that's a long-term, high-investment approach. What about shorter, more focused methods? You mentioned the come-in-shorts method. Sounds unusual.
The name is deliberately casual, yeah, to try and lower people's guards, but it's actually a very structured group assessment day, usually a morning. You have maybe 8 to 12 candidates interacting with 4 or 5 trained recruiters observing them.
A group interview, essentially. How does it work?
It typically unfolds in 3 phases, each designed to reveal different soft skills.
Okay, phase 1.
Phase 1 is all about listening and communication. They pair candidates up, give them time to learn about each other, and then each person has to present their partner to the group.
Ah, so you're not just seeing how they talk, but how well they listen.
Exactly. Did they actually capture the key points about the other person? Can they synthesize and present that information clearly? It's a clever way to assess active listening.
Smart. What's phase 2? Something about a team sport.
Yeah. Phase 2 involves a group activity, often creating and playing a simple game or sport with basic materials provided. The point isn't athletic skill, obviously. It's about observing group dynamics in a relaxed but still slightly competitive setting.
What are recruiters looking for there?
How people integrate, who hangs back, who takes charge, maybe too aggressively, who collaborates well, how do they handle minor setbacks or disagreements. It gives you real insight into their natural team behavior, their comportement professionnel.
But what about introverts? Someone brilliant but quiet might get lost in that kind of group energy.
That's a key consideration, and why Phase 3 is essential. Phase 3 is a final one-on-one interview. The recruiters know that some excellent candidates just don't thrive in group settings. This individual chat gives those quieter, more discreet profiles a chance to shine, to articulate their skills and thoughts directly. It ensures the whole process doesn't accidentally filter out valuable introverted talent.
So it balances group observation with individual assessment. Makes sense. These newer methods, Brandstorm or come-in-shorts, they're all about seeing skills in action. But even once you've hired someone, especially with the CDI in France, the evaluation isn't really over, is it? How does the trial period fit into this?
The trial period, the période d'essai, is often used, especially for younger hires or those entering under a CDI, as a kind of extended real-world final stage of the recruitment process.
Why, particularly for young employees?
Because the feeling might be that while they have the raw skills, savoir and maybe savoir-faire, they might lack some of the crucial workplace behaviors the comportement professionnel needed for that specific company. Things like navigating office politics, strictly adhering to procedures, understanding implicit hierarchies.
So the trial becomes the test of whether they can actually function effectively within that specific company culture.
Precisely. The goal is to see if they can be fully operationalized, if they fit the capital humane maison, the company's unique way of working. The trial period, which can be quite long in France, sometimes renewable up to 4 months or more depending on the role, gives managers time to really assess if the person doesn't just have the competence on paper, but if they demonstrate the required professional behaviors day in, day out.
So it's the final validation step, in a way.
In many ways, yes. It's the ultimate check before that long-term CDI commitment really locks in.
Okay. So wrapping this all up, what this deep dive seems to show is this real clash, this tension at the heart of hiring.
Absolutely. The traditional interview, it's fundamentally this flawed exercise in risk management. Both sides are managing risk. The candidate is performing to reduce the risk of getting rejected. The employer is probing, often clumsily, to reduce the risk of a bad hire, especially with something like a CDI hanging over them.
And the move towards these structured competency-based methods.
Like Lucide.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more innovative things like Brandstorm or structured assessment days. It's a direct reaction. It's a necessary response to the fact that relying on gut feelings, subjective questions, and unconscious bias just doesn't work ethically, legally, or even for getting the best people.
You know, the most striking thing for me isn't that candidates might stretch the truth, but that the traditional system almost forces them to perform to create those beautiful lies. It seems the best way for companies to actually find real talent isn't about getting better at spotting lies.
No, it's about building a better system.
Right. It's about rigorously structuring the whole process so that the truth, the measurable, demonstrable competence is the only thing that really counts. Making sure that factual validation is key. So it doesn't matter what your name is or how old you are or how well you practiced your handshake. What matters is, can you actually do the job?